Joining me now is the international affairs scholar, Jeffrey Sachs. Jeffrey, welcome back to Uncensored.
Great to be with you, Piers. Thanks a lot.
Where are we with this deal, do you think? So many competing views about it. My gut feeling is that Donald Trump was just desperate to get out of this Iran war. It has spiraled way out of his control, and that he'll just do anything it takes to extricate the United States from it. What's your reading?
I think that that's exactly the right reading. This was supposed to be a one-day affair, February 28th, 2026. They would kill the supreme leader, decapitate the government, take over Iran, and we'd all live happily ever after. That was the Netanyahu-Trump delusion. It failed, and since then we've been basically in a situation where the United States could not impose its will. Iran has retaliatory capacity until this moment. The world energy crisis continued as long as this debacle continues. And I agree with you. Trump wanted out. And I think with a very fragile basis, we might just get out of it. Israel will do everything possible to undermine this agreement. It already has started with new attacks in southern Lebanon. But Trump wants out, and he's been uncharacteristically clear with Mr. Netanyahu in recent days and hours not to screw it up.
This interview raises a much bigger question than whether the Iran conflict is truly over. The real question is what happens when a military operation fails to achieve its original goals and both sides suddenly start looking for a way out. In this discussion, Piers Morgan sits down with international affairs scholar Jeffrey Sachs to break down the reported agreement between the United States and Iran, and whether political pressure may have played a major role in bringing this conflict to a halt. If you're enjoying this type of political commentary, be sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and let me know your thoughts in the comments below. What makes this conversation interesting is that it goes far beyond the agreement itself. They discuss whether Donald Trump was trying to distance himself from a conflict that was becoming politically costly, what this could mean for Benjamin Netanyahu's political future, and why some analysts believe this war may have exposed the limits of American influence on the global stage. They also get into the growing role of China, shifting alliances in the Middle East, and how energy security could become an even bigger issue moving forward. Let's take a look.
I mean, we've got two elections coming this fall. One, the US midterm elections, which Donald Trump would have been acutely aware were becoming a massive problem because a lot of pressure from his Republican Party to sort this mess in Iran out before it caused even more political and economic damage. But you conversely have the elections looming in Israel in October, where Netanyahu is really unpopular, right to the point he's judged on what he's doing to defend national security in relation to what he's doing in Lebanon or Iran or wherever it may be, which many people believe is one of his motivating factors in continuing to be so aggressive on that stage. Do you think that's accurate? Do you think that the political expediency for both men here has played their part in reaching this point now where they have to potentially go their separate ways?
Well, I think Trump was accurate when he said a few days ago and then confirmed the quotes that were made by Axios that he told Netanyahu, everybody hates you now. Everybody hates Israel now. This is true, but this is Netanyahu's doing, of course. So I hope we see the end of Netanyahu's political career in their elections. And I think that it's very likely that Trump will soon be a lame duck president in the United States, in the sense that the Democrats will win at least the lower house of Congress, and all eyes will immediately turn to 2028 and Trump's own ability to stay clear of scandals, crises, and Congress will also be brought to an end. So I think for both politicians, this was a terrible debacle, probably worse for Netanyahu. This was his dream war. As he told us at the very beginning, at the first day, this was his dream war for 40 years. He tried to talk every American president into it. Trump was the only one gullible enough to fall for it. Trump fell for it, and the disaster is on both of them.
Where does it leave the Middle East, Jeffrey?
Well, it leaves the Middle East in a kind of limbo. Everybody understands the United States is no real security for the Gulf countries, certainly. Iran remains with a powerful military, a technologically sophisticated military, an ability to launch hypersonic missiles to protect itself and to retaliate against Israel. So this is a change. And of course, I think Israel is, of course, despised by just about every single country in the world. And a recent Pew survey has shown that. They have earned it themselves. When it comes to the United States, Trump is pretty much despised almost everywhere in the world as well. And the sense of the United States as a real ally has disappeared even in Europe. But I'm sure that in the Middle East, they're trying to figure out what the hell to do. And of course, there's no question that because of this, the place of China, the place of Russia, the place of other regional powers will be stronger. And the sense of the United States as a very powerful, rather erratic, politically unstable, one of many countries rather than the global power is now, I think, the reality for everybody with their eyes open. In other words, the days of the U.S. being the unchallenged dominant power, which was always true in Washington's eyes, but was also to an extent true in many other eyes, this war has accelerated the end of that idea as well.
Is the big winner in the end from this Iran war China?
China is, as we could see, again, very cautious, very stable. They have their own interests without question. In the midst of all of this, Trump went to Beijing and basically heard a lecture from Xi Jinping. And after he heard the lecture, he basically agreed with the lecture. He left Beijing saying he doesn't want Taiwan to do anything unsettling, much less to declare independence. He doesn't want a war with China. And he also has held in abeyance the U.S. arms sales to Taiwan. In other words, we also saw the limits of American power vis-a-vis China in the last 2 years. Last year, the U.S. tried a trade war against China. It lasted about 24 hours before China matched and raised, met and raised the U.S. Moves, and the U.S. backed down. China had too much leverage, the rare earths and other leverage. So the U.S. lost the trade war. The summit that took place showed the limits of power there. The events in Ukraine are showing the limits of American power in Eastern Europe. The events in the Gulf are showing the limits of power in the Gulf region. Now, mind you, the U.S. remains a very powerful country, a rich one, one that has a lot of sway, but it is not the world's unipolar power. It's not the world's hegemon, and the limits of American power, I think, are now very clearly in view. And to my mind, this is very realistic and just fine, by the way, because so much of the damage in the world was U.S. wars of choice that created a mess. And maybe the U.S. will reconsider next time someone comes in and says, hey, why don't you try a one-day war with us? Maybe they'll have a little bit more self-restraint.
Where are we with energy? Because I don't think most people outside of the kind of really hardcore, knowledgeable energy experts were quite aware of just how much of the global energy the Iranians had potential control of. And now, of course, everybody does, including the Iranian regime, who realized that it became their most potent weapon was the control of the Strait of Hormuz, particularly when coupled with letting off a few missiles at their Gulf state neighbors. Obviously, they can, if they want to, they can pull that lever whenever they see fit. What happens to global energy in light of that? I mean, are you going to see countries like Saudi and states like Saudi and others now try and create a separate place outside of the Strait of Hormuz to try and do business? I mean, what will be the practical reality of this war?
Well, I think the fundamental longer-term trend is to accelerate the fundamental move away from coal, oil, and gas to wind, hydro, solar, nuclear power in some cases, given all the complexities of that issue. But the idea is that for years, many people said that the move away from fossil fuel was important to save the planet Earth. Then, because of China's advances in technology, more and more countries came around and said, it's actually cheaper. It's not just grid parity, it's actually cheaper to go with large solar fields, for example, because China had knocked down the price so dramatically. Now there's another argument in the air. I hear it everywhere, actually, in the last weeks, which is that it is now a matter of national security to use one's own sunshine coming in, to use one's own wind, maybe to tap into the hydropower of the next door neighbor and so forth, but not to rely on the long distance transmission or trade in fossil fuels. So there's a national security argument that has been added to all of the other arguments. And I was on a call today in Asia with several governments and multilateral development institutions talking about the accelerated move to basically renewable energy as the backbone for a lot of East Asia. This is going to happen. That's a longer term proposition, but I think a lot of governments are, even in recent weeks, turning their attention to what can we do to harness our own energy sources.
Yeah, I think you're right. Jeffrey Sachs, always great to talk to you. Thank you very much.
So there's one major takeaway that I think viewers should focus on after watching that discussion. Whether you agree with Jeffrey Sachs or not, the central argument he's making is that this conflict exposed the limits of what military power alone can accomplish. Throughout the interview, he repeatedly comes back to the idea that the original objectives of this operation were much bigger than what was ultimately achieved, and that reality forced political leaders to rethink their approach. Now, obviously, people are going to have different opinions about that assessment. Some will argue that the operation achieved important strategic goals, while others will say it created more problems than it solved. But what's difficult to ignore is the fact that the conversation eventually shifted from victory and objectives to de-escalation and finding a path forward. That alone tells you something about how complicated this situation became. The second thing that stood out to me was the political dimension of all of this. Sachs makes the argument that domestic political pressures may have played a significant role in the decisions being made by leaders on both sides. Again, that's his interpretation, but it's an important point because foreign policy decisions don't happen in a vacuum. Political realities at home often influence what leaders are willing or unwilling to do abroad. And finally, I think the broader discussion about global influence is worth paying attention to. One of the themes running throughout this interview is the idea that the international system is becoming more competitive and more multipolar. Whether that's completely accurate or not is open for debate, but there is no question that countries around the world are increasingly looking at a wider range of partners and power centers when making strategic decisions. At the end of the day, this conversation wasn't just about Iran, Israel, or the United States. It was really about how global politics is changing, how conflicts can produce unintended consequences, and how difficult it can be for any country to fully control events once they begin to unfold. Those are the bigger questions that will likely remain long after this particular conflict fades from the headlines. Let me know what you think in the comments below. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you don't miss future political commentary and analysis. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.